Hello and welcome. My name is Julianne Russo, and today, as part of the Poet's Voice reading series, sponsored by Black Moss Press, you are going to be treated to a unique and wonderful conversation between two very well-known poets, who are also editors. I'd like you to meet Bruce Meyer, Poet Laureate Emeritus of Barrie, Ontario, and Michael Mirolla, the editor of Gwinnerica Books in Oakville, Ontario. Both are poets, and both know more about the art and craft of poetry than most people in this country. In just a second, I'll turn this conversation over to Bruce, but first I'd like to mention that both these authors are publishing new titles with Black Moss Press. Bruce has a new book coming out this spring called Grace of Falling Stars, and Michael's new book, which is hot off the press, is called At the End of the World. There will be more information on how to purchase these books at the end of the segment. And now I'll turn things over to Bruce.
Thank you, Julianne. It's great to be here today. It's Groundhog Day when we're recording this. So I'm here to talk to Michael Mirolla. And I'm always fascinated, Michael, when I see your background. You're not in a basement, are you? Are you in a basement there?
I am. This is the Gwinnerica office.
The Gwinnerica office, okay. I was thinking about this because one of the great themes that runs throughout At the End of the World is, of course, you keep returning to the motif of caves, things in the underworld and so forth, and you keep coming back to this, I suppose, the classical idea of an ekousis, which is a harrowing or going down into the underworld and so forth. You see it in Book 11 of the Odyssey, and you see it in Book 6 of the Aeneid and so forth, and you keep it's one of those things that you even see it in the New Testament with the Easter sort of story, the harrowing of hell and so forth. What is it about caves that fascinates you?
Well, yeah, you're supposed to ask not difficult questions. So, Kate, what is about caves that fascinate me? Well, what you've just said, for one thing. I mean, you know, they're worlds where it's not the same as what we consider that the kind of reality that we're usually used to. So it's a place of mystery in many religions, for example, and for human beings as well. You know, the idea of birth, for example, and both birth and death, are coming out of a cave and going into a cave, as it were. All of that, and then there's also the idea of the bones. That's the other thing that goes through a lot of the At the End of the World are bones, the carrying of bones, and pick up bones. You pick them up, you get them in a cave. This is where you go in many cases. The other thing about a cave is that one of the original religions, one of the original matriarchal religions, was a worship of a bear that came out of that in a cave. That's the original, one of the original, like in Anatolia, I believe, and also in the northern parts of Russia, what is now Russia, where this religion was worshiping of a mother bear, and so all those things together kind of gave me the idea of trying to put together a book about all of this, And as you said, the underworld. I have a poem called Demeter Uproots Herself, and this is a part of that is about the daughter being pulled down into the underworld. Right?
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, because that's one of the sort of the Greek motifs that sort of enters the book. And do you have that on hand to read, or?
It is one of the ones that I've got on my screen.
Please read it. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Let me get to it here. All right. Demeter makes plans to uproot herself. And this is for C. Already, the umbilical cord intact, but with eyes downcast, the lamb she's fondling against her chest seems to understand what the rest of us keep at arm's length, off until our final breath. A mother's love, be it as genuine and sweet as myth, can only wrap itself around you for so long. The mossy path through the wood leaves footprints that slowly fill with seepage and mirrors of a turbid sky, memories of Escher woodcuts, Celtic magic buried as traps for Roman centurions, the furious buzz of flies rising as in some no-exit place. And then one god after the other tumbles out and prepares to take a stand, from minor to major, pissant to thunder, but always harping on the same note. Worship me, or else watch me turn into a serial killer. Watch me drag your children under. Satyrs and nymphs spring forth amid gnarled tree roots, spitting out earth and earthworms. They clear the way for a troop of trick-playing sheep and goats. Lamb trailing a swollen-bellied mother, they waddle in elegant disarray, rushing towards the voice that they've come to trust, that calls to them now from a clearing in the trees, formed by a blast of well-placed lightning. One hand clutching grain, the other behind her back, where a glint of sunlight flicks off sharpened metal. Mare-headed Aganippe scatters her blessings staccato style as she stands on the steps of the self-consecrated temple she had her consort build in the clearing to separate herself from sacred law, eternal harvest, merciful destruction, and the endless hunger of needy partners. This is where, she tells you, lamb on her lap, she will spend newborn winter, away from the rancid odor of spilled mead, palace intrigue, and thoughts of daughters dragged down to some twilight universe by horny demigods tired of gazing at their own reflections, and where, using her brother's always handy flamethrower to keep warm as snow erases all color and wolfish shadows gather, she will celebrate the joy of a newfound religion. Glass of red wine on the table and mutton stew gurgling on the pot-bellied stove.
Wow, that there's that sense of climbing, literally climbing out of something there. I was also hearing echoes, and I think they turn up later on in the book, the echoes of Orpheus's return to the upper world. Mm-hmm. I was going to ask you also about, because you mentioned the bears, and in the Anatolian tradition, from very early on, you also have a poem about primeval caves, one of the most primeval places in Europe, which is the Lascaux caves in France and so forth. And you've got a poem there, Constellation Caves Constellation of Caves, Lascaux, where you see people trying to decorate them, trying to express themselves, so that the cave is not just a place where someone is locked in or waiting, but it's a place where the spirit is being explored. And that seems to be another theme that runs throughout the entire book, this theme of trying to understand and exploring the spirit, whether it's mindfulness or whether it's the sense of a very primeval spirituality and so forth. You have another poem to read.
Yeah, I'm not sure about spirituality, but I'm sure part of the idea is a creativity, at least. Let's put it that way. That's reflected, in that I do have that poem. In fact, it's another one of the poems that I was going to read. Let me just check for a second. I think I might have it here. Yeah, Constellation of Caves, Lascaux.
Great poem,
Would you like me to read that?
Yes, please, yes.
Okay. Constellation of Caves, Lascaux. There, at the horn's tip, there, see it? Do I need to point? A star, cave-bound, from a sky last seen 15,000 years ago. A star, you say, at the tip of a rhino's horn? Amid the rock dust that swirls as you move? Yes, a star, about to once more impale the hunter, already prone on his back, preparing to give up the ghost. A star that marks a comet's passage, perhaps, light refracted down a shaft where images of one world, impossibly alien, impossibly high, are captured, etched in black against the stone wall canvas. Taurus, Leo, Virgo, Scorpius, Pisces. Can it be? We are caught surfing in a space that spills out beyond any fixed state, where the wave collapses and time compresses, where stars, spears, startled prey, wounded predators flow from rough cutouts for the observer to fit together, to allow the spark to arc between cavern and heaven. All the while sitting outside the frame, in an installation art lawn chair maybe, amid fields of pregnant wheat, imagining how dimensions might accordion in a desperate bid to touch the real. or in front of a magic blue screen, punching words to keep that star-blessed horn at bay.
I love the line in the desperate bid to touch the real, because there's this, you deal with another cave, which is the philosophical cave, the cave, the Plato's cave and so forth. And, of not being able to understand, reality, because you're seeing reality sort of reflected off of a wall, and you can't quite grasp what the truth is and so forth.
Yeah, but I try to take a different look at Plato's cave, and I don't see it as sort of images reflected on a wall which are not reality, because in that poem I talk about the difference between darkness and light, and how quite often what we see as appearance, which is what Plato is talking about when he's talking about the shadows on the wall. This is an appearance of a reality. His reality, of course, was the Platonic ideal, which we no longer believe in. Most people no longer believe in. So the question is, what exactly is reality once you get outside the cave? Once you step outside Plato's cave, what reality do you see? Is there just another cave, a larger cave that for you to see more shadows in, or what exactly is it that you see? And my own impression is that my own push is towards a belief that the words are what create the reality. Our poetry, our writing, in some ways creates the world that we exist in. I'm not saying it's the world that exists for other people, but it's the world that we exist in. And so the striving, what we're always attempting to do in our poetry is try to get the word to come as close to the object as possible. But we'll never achieve that, of course, because words are words. They're not, like Samuel Johnson said, I mean, when I kick a stone, my foot hurts. But I wrote a poem once that said, like a stupid schoolboy, here I keep on repeating it always. Every time I repeat the same thing all the time in an attempt to try to get as close to the object as possible, using, and Plato's cave is a bit like that, in my opinion. It's not as clear cut as Plato wanted to be, but again, when you analyze Plato, he's not saying that. He's saying that the entire universe is actually a cave, is what he's saying. The only reality is Platonic forms, the ideals, right?
Yeah.
So in a sense, you're saying the same thing I am, but but I don't believe in Platonic forms. Sorry?
It's almost as if the cave is a school, but one of the first poems in the book is Cave Entrance Exam, which I thought was a great sort of play on the idea of a cave entrance. But in order to get into the cave, you have to write an exam. There's the question of the exam coming out, because it's one of those things that I was looking for in the book, and you sort of just shy away from it. It's the idea not just of coming out of the cave, but the idea of a kind of resurrection. Would you care to comment on that? Just
Well, I mean, again, if we're talking about physical resurrection, or are we talking about a way to through the thicket, seeing things more clearly? I was
thinking of resurrection in the Christian sense,
I did stay away from that. I didn't talk about that at all. In fact, the rolling away of the stone after 3 days, and then the coming out. I didn't want to get into that side of things, because I didn't want to. I think what happens is if you do that, you end up kind of putting yourself in a position whereby you have to start defending yourself in some way or other. I didn't want to do that, and that's also from the fact that it's a beautiful metaphor, and you know, you could write a poem about, you know, where all that actually came from, and it's not from Christian religion, right? I mean, you know, we have previous religions where I believe the Gilgamesh, I think, has a resurrection. You know, so that's, I think that could be a book on its own, basically.
Oh, there you go. That's your next book.
No. I'm done with caves. I'm done with caves for now.
Well, do you have any favorite caves? Because it's quite a catalog of you know, I felt like I was spelunking, you know, as I was editing the book. But do you have any favorite caves of all the caves that you visited? Because it's quite a catalog.
You mean real caves?
Yeah, in terms of the real caves you visited or studied and things.
Well, it's
like
funny that the real caves that I visited, I didn't even talk about it, and that's the one that's in Rome, where the catacombs are.
Yeah.
You know, there's also in my village in Italy, they've dug up I believe it's 16th or 17th century. Underneath the church, underneath one of the churches, and it's got the frescoes and all of that, and it's underneath, and that to me that was really something. But the catacombs were what left a really big impression on me, and again, I didn't include that in this book, in this, because I wanted to talk about, as you say, I spent a lot of time in caves, but I didn't actually. I spent a lot of time in caves in my mind and in researching caves, but I didn't spend a lot of time actually literally in caves, because I have a fear of enclosed spaces. So
that's interesting, because you know we always have to address our fears in some way, and I'm
exactly.
Do you have another poem you could read?
I'm sorry?
Do you have another poem?
Yeah, no, I've got I put up 5 or 6 that are possible. Let me see another one here. Well, I've got there's got one called "In the Cave of Contemplation," for whoever wants to pick up the torch. This one's when speaking in the short squint from forenoon to gloom of Updike, where am I headed? There are days that fit me into footpaths no longer present, beyond metaphor. Here leaves continue to pulse long after they've sunk to mulch. Here the ball's solipsism arcs from hand to sky and back in deltas of stillborn time. Here waves flick their tongues and brush clean the ravages that gather around us in the day-to-day. I find myself standing bemused in someone else's past, a park, a bench. Schoolyard children skip into old age, run through brick walls, ascend to hollowed ground. An abandoned tire comes to rest on its flank. Oil-skimmed water quivers in a rubber pool. Sunlight sparks. I kneel, plunge my hands into silt to scoop up the sacerdotal larvae, to hold them towards the fierce radiance. They shimmer for a still moment before vanishing. I, on the other hand, am still here, trapped, thinking of Updike, rabbits, afternoons that taste precariously like dust.
Very nice. There's a sense in a lot of the poems too that the cave keeps somebody from being heard, that the sound can't get out, and it's almost like it's like the covers, like you're pressing, the poems are pressing against the covers of the book, that they're trying to be heard. They're trying to get out of their particular cave.
Yeah. Maybe not quite that. Maybe it's more like what I was talking about before, in the sense that the language can never actually get to the membrane between that and the world, whatever the world is. So maybe that's part of it. I'm not sure about. There are places where I have echoes in the caves, like in the first poem about the bear.
The choruses that you have in one of the poems about the bones, they keep repeating and so forth. Yeah.
Right. And yeah. So, but I think it's more like, yeah, maybe in a sense that the words stay within the cave, like there's no way for the words to get out. in that sense. Like we're trapped within ourselves as well. And,
Do you have some more poems to read?
Yeah, I think I've got a couple more. This one here is called, this is an interesting one. It's called Arguments for Safe Passage.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Slender reeds whistling like autumn, stiff, arthritic in their old age, brittle backs snapping in the wind, feet puddled in murky water, fluff exploding in hopes of reproduction. Is that any way to start a poem in the quest for contemporary vibes? Since when have puffballs contributed to the betterment of humankind? Or a willow shedding tears brought gain to the electric marketplace? Without the bassinet afloat on its surface, you ask, why is the river even there? Can a snake-necked swan crush stone into powder for brick and mortar? Can a mountainside in bloom bring the slave/sex trade to a halt? Can the seaweed's dancing fronds save an abandoned child from drowning? On the other hand, has a pond ripple under moonlight ever molested anyone? Stood by as a military dictator bombed recalcitrant stadia, unleashed weapons to spread disease, hacked software for corrupting nuclear centrifuges. Quote, an aching tree leans into the wind, craggy body cradling tender limbs, lost hearts scratched into bleeding bark, close quote. Next, you're going to tell me how wandering lonely as a, don't say it, will wash away the sludge of sexual assault, grubbiness turned inside out to reveal unctuous poison clinging to systemic matrix, the space so manufactured it feels as if some other species has stolen into us during the night, has hollowed us out like a phalanx of body-snatching wasps, simulacra marching towards an event horizon to debrief our humanity. Quote, a broken reed rushes down a mountain stream, righting itself in the swirling waters. I am creation, so watch me bleed. I am this poem, so watch me glow. I am the present, so watch me vanish.
Wonderful, wonderful. So we're talking to Michael Mirolla. I guess one final question, if we're coming down the home stretch here, is poetry the way we make ourselves heard, or is it in fact poetry struggling to be heard in its own right, or is it? It's a question of working around all these. It's a question of working around all these different barriers, or working around the cave walls, or trying to be heard within the cave. I mean, is there? How does poetry make us heard?
How does poetry make us heard, or how do we make poetry heard?
Make poetry heard too. Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure if is that the point of poetry, of writing poetry? I don't know. I mean, the question has so many different things. Are we talking about why is it that so very few people read poetry today? Are we talking about the fact that poetry has become, in a sense, an elitist type of endeavor? Is it should we be returning back to people's poetry? I don't know. I mean,
in particular about something you keep coming back to in the book, and that is that the voice of the persona in the poems is saying something, and he's not sure whether anybody's hearing it or not.
I see. Okay. Yeah. No, that's again, it's part of what I was saying before in terms of the effort to try to reach some type of understanding, try to reach the audience as well, but also to reach yourself when you're writing a poem. The first person that you're aiming at towards has to be you, the person writing the poem, and then after that, you have to make sure that the coding of the poem is there, so that at least some parts at some level it gets across to someone else. It gets across to other people. I don't think that the full blown emphasis of a poem is ever gets out to other people. I'm not even sure if it ever gets out to the poet, because in many ways, when you're writing a poem, you're not writing some philosophical, logical thesis, right? There's a part of the poem that should remain a mystery always, and you know, you can't really explain it. Okay, so why did you do that? Why did you put in that line? You know, well, actually, you know, I don't know. I didn't. It just came to me, or you know, and what does that line mean? Well, I don't know. It might mean this, or it might mean that, or maybe it doesn't mean anything. It just means that some effort through our language, which is not a very precise instrument in the first place. You know, I mean, trying to describe emotions, for example, in language is one of the. I find it. I don't know. Again, I feel like a stupid school child, you know, trying to when you're trying to explain human behavior, you know, through language. You know, most times it's just acting and reacting, and I think at some level that's what a poem should do too. It should make you react, right, instead of thinking about it, instead of having to think about it. I've been accused of overthinking my poems. I've been told by some people that I should let loose more with my poetry. But you know, it's tough. It's tough when you have a sort. It depends on the kind of mind you have. So you know, mine works that way. I want those words to be exact. I want them to be just right. I want them to hit the right notes. And I think you know that has to be that has to be the way the poem is written. If it's not, then it fails in a way. It fails worse than it would normally fail anyway. But yeah, you know. I mean, my concern with what's happening to poetry today, what I've seen, a lot of people are saying, wow, last year poetry sales went up like, I forget now, 40% or something compared to the previous year. Now, but you dig a little more deeply into those statistics and you find out that one or two books are what made those sales. And then you open up those books and you say, well, you know, I could have ordered this from Hallmark Hall of Fame, and, you know, I wouldn't have had to pay this for this. I could have just, you know, read it off of you know, Hallmark, you know, cards. So then you start to get into, well, people start accusing you of being elitist, or you know, well, yeah. So anyway, so it's a tough. Poetry is the most precise of the genres. It has to be, and yet it has to be the one that has to express the most emotion. So that's quite a high wire to negotiate. I hope I answered your question a little bit.
Yeah, I think that was a very thorough answer. Yeah. So thank you, Michael Mirolla. Your book's titled At the End of the World. It's published by Black Moss Press. And when will it be available? What the release?
I believe the date is April 1st is the pub date.
I'm looking forward to it. So.
All right. Well,
I'll
thanks
hand
again.
Back to Julianne.
Yes, thank you both for joining us today. And thank you, Bruce, for hosting this edition. And thanks for our viewers for taking time to join us here today. And just a reminder, there will be links at the end of this video where you can find more information about book sales and book retailers. So that concludes this installment of The Poet's Voice. Stay safe, and we'll see you all soon.
Yeah.